For many years now, we've heard word of would college football be better with a college football commissioner? Of course, that never really gained any traction. The conference commissioners have no reason to give up their power to someone to be anointed above them, but this is our podcast, so our rules. John and I will be becoming college football commissioners on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. John, welcome in. Do you think you can handle all this power that we're giving ourselves by making us commissioners of college football? And how do you feel like sharing that title with me? Do you want to kind of have a battle royale here for who gets to be the true commissioner?
I'm okay with this since you did have the idea. I can deal with co-commissioners. I'm a little bit offended that our names never came up when they talked about, in speculation about who should be the college football commissioner. It was always Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Saban doesn't need to be commissioner. He needs to run a bed and breakfast. You've seen his guidelines on those Verbo commercials. I like what he does. Very detailed, very organized, very structured. He'd be great at that, but no, I'm sorry our names never came up, but this is an opportunity sort of to showcase our ability. So I welcome the opportunity.
Well, I think too, John, if in this mythical world in which Nick Saban ever became college football commissioner, which is not going to happen, I think he would be a great commissioner for the coaches. I don't think he would be a particularly good commissioner for anybody else. But see, you and I, we can kind of be unbiased there and not necessarily favor the coaches too much or the players too much or the conferences too much. Kind of play it down the middle. Now, press box food would probably get significantly better with us being commissioners. But other than that, I don't think we would show too much bias in favor of one particular party.
We would slash those burgers in Columbia, Missouri, real fast. They're off the menu immediately. We will act more swiftly than Donald Trump's team in ridding the world of those hamburgers in Columbia, Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would it really kill him to put in a taco bar? Okay, John, I'm going to let you take the first crack at it here as college football commissioner. I guess really rather than being co-commissioners, we're kind of taking turns. 1 day on, 1 day off. 24 on, 24 off.
Yeah, everybody needs some time off. So I think we would be interchangeable in these roles. The first thing I'd like to do, and this has just come up in the news about speculation for a new playoff system. Obviously, 12 teams wasn't enough. We went for decades with no playoff. Then we go to 2, then 4, and now 12, but that now is going out the door really fast. That has no staying power. 14 maybe, 16 maybe. And I'm fine with that. I would like a 16-team playoff. And with the 16-team playoff, I would eliminate, this is part of my edict, I will eliminate conference championship games. Start the playoff system, the playoff a week earlier. Nobody gets a bye, no buys. You see the teams, and you go from there. So you got great games every weekend. In the conference championship games are just overkill right now. They're unnecessary. So that's the first thing I would do as commissioner.
John, I might be okay with a 16-team playoff. I prefer it at 12, but in the sake of harmony here, I could go for 16. But will you give me – can we get rid of this idea where every conference gets like 4 automatic bids before the season starts, which is, according to Yahoo Sports, is what the SEC and Big Ten are angling for? I'm fine with the SEC getting 5 or 6 bids in a given year if they have 5 or 6 teams that earn it, or the Big Ten, if they got – 5 teams that earn their way in, that's fine too. I hate this idea of before the season even kicks off of earmarking a particular number of bids for each conference. So can we go with a 16-team playoff, but there's not, 4 automatic bids for the SEC and Big Ten? If you want 4 or 5 bids, you got to earn them with having that many teams in the top 16.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. You won't get an argument from me. That's un-American. You got to earn your way in. Yeah, I know the SEC is the best league. Oops, I guess it used to be the best league until Ohio State's NIL program got going full speed ahead. Michigan, Ohio State having won back-to-back national titles, and so yeah, I'm fine with that. I don't like that idea. I mean, if you have 16 teams in a college football playoff, do you really think the SEC wouldn't be good enough to get 4 teams in? Good gracious. What? I-
I totally agree, John. Like that's the thing that baffles me the most with this reporting that the Big Ten and SEC are going to angle for 4 automatic bids apiece. I'm not questioning the reporting. First came out from Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports yesterday. Very, very good reporting, very well sourced. So I'm sure Ross is on the ball here. I'm not questioning the reporting. I'm questioning why on earth would the SEC and Big Ten even want this? I hate this idea anyway, but I don't really see, to your point, how it behooves the SEC or the Big Ten to kind of pigeonhole in with this number of automatic bids going to all these different conferences. The reporting is that 4 would go to the SEC, 4 would go to the Big Ten, 2 apiece would go to the ACC and Big 12. So if we're doing math, that's 12 bids right there. And then if you had a 14-team playoff, well, 1 has to still go to the group of 5. So that leaves just 1 at-large bid if the playoff were 14 teams. I guess in a 16-team playoff, then you could still have 3 at-large bids. But I just don't see why that's necessary for the SEC and Big Ten to do that, to be preordaining where all these bids are going. Just play the season. You're going to have good teams. I think the selection committee has historically favored those conferences. Now, the SEC, kind of got its feathers ruffled this year that it didn't get an extra team in the playoff, and SMU and Indiana got the bids instead. But if you look over the course of history, the playoff selection committee has been pretty good to the SEC. I don't think there's like this, there shouldn't be this fear that somehow the SEC would be getting snubbed of bids in a 16-team playoff and it wouldn't be getting at least 4 teams in. It seems wholly unnecessary and pretty stupid to me.
Well, but you're not as paranoid as football coaches are.
Well, that's true.
And there's always that fear, which was given a lot of oxygen after this past election when the SEC only placed 3 teams in the playoff. The strength of schedule issue. I don't think the College Football Playoff Selection Committee favors that quite enough. I think you really need to take a more like the NCAA Selection Committee in basketball for the NCAA tournament. Go more on strength of schedule. And I think that would have happened. We just started this, so I think they would have recalibrated here and said, wait a minute. You look at the results of those first round games, and obviously there need to be some changes. You can enhance this the playoff, but I think it's a security blanket. The SEC is clinging to a security blanket here. That's why it wants all 4 in. If it's assured of getting 4 teams in, then it can say, okay, we can go to a 9-game conference schedule now. I think it's scared to go to a 9-game conference schedule unless it's assured. Apparently, 4 is the magic number for the SEC. It wants at least 4. It wants more than that. It prefers 8, but 4 has to be a minimum.
And interestingly, if you were just looking at the final CFP rankings from this past year, if it would have been a 16-team playoff and you just would have gone off the rankings, the SEC would have gotten 6 teams into the field. So at a 12-team playoff, they only got 3 teams. But if they would have extended it out to 16 teams this year, Alabama would have been in, Ole Miss would have been in, and South Carolina would have been in, and then Miami would have been the extra team. So it's like we didn't need this preordained nonsense. This to me, John, is kind of like playing my 5-year-old niece in a game of memory. She claims she's so good at memory, could beat you, but yet she's got to set up all the rules before it starts, and they all seem to tilt in her favor. She might get an extra turn, or if you get a match that's her favorite set of cards, well, she gets that even though you got the match. And that to me is kind of what the SEC and Big Ten are doing here. They want you to believe that they're the best conferences, which no argument, though they are the best conferences. But then why do you have to rig the rules before the game even starts to prove that you are? You're the best conference, so go out there and play the games, and you shouldn't have to cheat to get your flowers at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you were mentioning 6 teams in the past season, if you'd had a 16-team playoff, you'd have had 6 SEC teams. So how many SEC teams could Ohio State have beaten on the way to a national championship? I don't know if the extra teams would have helped the SEC this past season, but maybe in the future. But no, come on, let's. That's almost that's almost as an admission. Well, we're not quite what we used to be. We need to be assured of that. I think the SEC will have more than 4 teams in most years.
Yeah, and I don't think they would need to rig the rules to get more than 4. So, but all right, that's a good start for your commissionership, John. I got one for you. I might have to catch you napping here. I don't know if you'll go for this or not. When you come back to the office the following day, you might pass your own order to get rid of this, but we'll see what you think of this one. I am going with I'm giving all athletes, John, 5 playing seasons, but that's all you get. You don't get a 6th season. You don't get a 7th season or an 8th season. You get 5 years to play 5. So the redshirt rule goes away. If the coach doesn't want to play you 1 year, well, that's the coach's decision, but you're not getting an extra year because of that. You can be a star for 5 years, or you can ride the pine for 5 years, but that's all you get. You get 5 years to play 5. No more of these like 8th year seniors that we see sometimes now. And we should probably acknowledge here, John, that with our commissionerships, we maybe had to stack the courts a little bit in our favor, because we don't know how some of these edicts we're going to be dropping down today might be challenged in court. Sometimes we play lawyer on this podcast, but, well, neither one of us have a JD. But in this world, we've got the courts in our favor, and I'm saying you get 5 years to play 5. Enjoy them. No more 8th year seniors.
Well, do you do away with red shirts here?
I'm doing away with red shirts. You don't. Yeah, if the coach wants to put you on the bench all year, well, I guess that's the coach's decision. But you don't have to redshirt to get a 5th year. You can play all 5 of those seasons if the coach wants to play you.
I'm willing to compromise with this since you did as much with my my first order of the day as commissioner. However, the idea that I was hoping that Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia could be a lifetime college quarterback, not an NFL guy, but I could see him as sort of the Tom Brady of college football, a 42-year-old Pavia leading the Commodores into the Music City Bowl. Yeah, I really like watching that guy play. He's just so feisty, has such a good attitude, lifts up his teammates, plays hurt, whatever it takes. So I regret that, but in the interest of harmony, I'll go along with this. I don't like red shirting. That just gives coaches a chance to play games. We got enough games with this setup. So yeah, just give everybody 5 years. Maybe at some point we can talk about 6.
What about if we just grandfathered in Pavia, John? He's kind of operating under the old structure, so we could grandfather him in. But any new athlete now, you get 5 years to play 5 seasons, no more red shirts.
Yeah, and Pavia could play forever and ever.
Sure. Yeah. 42-year-old quarterback in the doors.
He gives new meaning to the term veteran signal caller.
Yeah.
Some scribes like to put in print.
Senior citizen signal caller. All right, so we've changed the playing eligibility rules. We've changed the playoffs. You got another one for us, John?
Yes, I do. Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Great tradition, great program, great stadium, great ushers. nicest ushers I've ever encountered at a college football game. Everybody's so polite and nice there. Uh, I love the university. I love going there, just seeing the campus. I went there the first time when I was in college, way back in, what was that, 1700s, I guess. Yeah, but I was impressed right away and have been ever since. I've always enjoyed covering games there. However, it's just not fair that Notre Dame gets. It's just like, yeah, you're Notre Dame, and everybody else is just some smuck that has to play in a conference. Notre Dame needs to join a conference if it wants. Now, if playing in college football playoff is not a big deal to the Fighting Irish, fine, stay an independent. But if you're going to compete for a national championship and everybody else has to play in a conference, Notre Dame should as well. It's just different in terms of in terms of a competitive level when you're playing another conference rival. It just is. I think teams play harder in rivalry games and they play harder in conference games. So, yeah, I just think Notre Dame has to join the party if it wants to celebrate a championship at the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, John. It doesn't move me as much either way, but I don't have an objection to it. So I could see you feel strongly about it. I don't object to this. I'm fine with it. One thing that I think is interesting with this talk of a 16-team playoff, I think it's going to stack the deck even more favorable to an independent like Notre Dame. Because right now, one thing Notre Dame has to give up by not being in a conference is and this was no great sacrifice this past season, but the rules of the 12-team playoff are they make Notre Dame ineligible for a bye because you have to be a conference champion under this current structure to get a bye. So Notre Dame does have to give up something by not being in a conference. Now, like I said, we could make the argument of whether that was really giving anything up this past year, since all four of the teams that got a bye lost in their first round. But I think if you ask most coaches, would you rather have a bye into the quarterfinals or would you not? Most coaches would say, yeah, I'd rather have the bye, even though it didn't work out for those teams this year. If they go to a 16-team playoff, like they're talking about, John, with no byes, Notre Dame's got it made. They're not giving anything up by not being in a conference. They're eligible for the number 1 seed in the tournament without being in a conference. If these other conferences play some sort of conference championship game or some sort of like play-in date that they're talking about for their bubble teams, they play each other on conference championship weekend to decide who gets the final automatic bids for their leagues. Notre Dame can just sit at home and say, hey, we're happy with our spot in the playoff. You guys, knock skulls for another weekend. Oh, by the way, maybe give us the number 1 seed too. I think they're really set up in great position for a 16-team playoff. So I don't have an objection to your argument here that they need to be in a conference. And I'm wondering, John, I don't know if you'll go for this one. I'm going to throw it out there, see if you'll go for this. I don't really care for these super leagues in general. Now, if I was a business person, if I was running the SEC and Oklahoma and Texas had been available, yeah, I would have grabbed them. I thought that was the right business move for the SEC to do. And I don't really have a problem with Oklahoma and Texas being in the SEC. But in general, I don't love this super conference construct for college sports where you got teams from coast to coast. You got traditional rivalries being interrupted because of all this alignment. I would like to cap conference inclusion at 12 members, John, and then maybe in our next month as commissionership, we could sort of figure out how we would reshape the conferences to where there was no more than 12 teams in a conference. But to me, I think once you get past 12, you're getting a little unwieldy for a conference. Your teams aren't even playing each other. You could go multiple football seasons in a row with conference members not playing each other. I think 12's about as big as it should get. I'm wondering if you think you might be able to come along with that. We cap these conferences at 12 teams, and at a later date, maybe we could reassign teams to figure out how we're going to create these conferences of no more than, they could have less than 12, fewer than 12, but no more.
I'm fine with that, but I would like to an addendum. I would like to be able to bring back the Pac-12. You
Mm.
don't have to call it the Pac-12. You can call it Big Ten West or
Uh-huh.
whatever. But I miss the Pac-12, and I don't like the idea. I just never have embraced the possibility of Washington meeting Rutgers in a conference game late in the year with so much riding on the outcome. So I would, yeah, the idea, and this extends in other sports as well, the idea of playing these cross-country trips, it just doesn't work. And I understand the power grab that we've had this, but that was because we had no commissioner. If we'd have been commissioner, we'd say, "Oh, wait a minute, Big Ten.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you really need Washington, ACC? Is it really necessary to, when I see a score like NC State 10, Stanford 7, a first quarter score, it just doesn't resonate. It's like, oh yeah, that's a conference game.
Mm-hmm.
No, my first reaction, oh, Stanford and NC State, what an odd non-conference matchup. Who brokered that deal? No, it's just silly. And it doesn't matter. If you want to call these super conferences, fine. There's no number assigned to them, how many teams you have to be to call yourself a super conference. We can call ourselves super commissioners.
Right.
If,
And there's only
if
two of us.
yeah. So, in fact, I think that's another change I would make. Yeah, we would be not known just as commissioners, but super commissioners. It just gives us that omnipotent sensation that we pretty much can control everything. But no, I'm fine with that.
And think
You
of
know,
some of the great leagues we could bring back, John. I have to imagine you liked the old Southwest Conference with
oh,
as much as you like Texas, the state of
oh,
Texas,
yeah.
having all those Texas schools in one league.
Oh,
I was really partial to like the old Big East. If we can get the band back together
uh-huh.
in the old Big East, just a mecca for college basketball. Yeah, I think we could really, and you know, college football fans are so into tradition, and I think fans, they always say they're not going to go along with changes, but if it means that they're not going to watch the games anymore when push comes to shove, well, they want to watch the games, so they usually go along with changes. But I think fans would, 90% of fans, don't you think, John, would love this, capping conferences at 12 teams, getting some of the old bands back together, restoring some of those rivalries that have been lost by realignment. I really think fans would be totally on board with this idea.
Yeah, you're tugging at my heartstrings there with the Southwest Conference. And let's face it, the reason the Southwest Conference disbanded really couldn't control the cheating in that league. Well, cheating's fine now. There is no cheating. You can buy players all you want. The Southwest Conference would be a super conference in the NIL era. Yeah,
Yeah.
there no question about it. But it was just so great. I'm talking about whereas now we can have a conference game between Washington and Rutgers, or Washington and Maryland. The idea of all these Texas schools playing each other. You have former high school rivals lined up, some as teammates, some as opposition on the other teams. I mean, Texas can provide so many players for so many schools. It's done that forever, and it would just be really cool to have them all incorporated into one Texas league. And now you don't have to deal with Arkansas. It's in the SEC, so you
Unless
can
we
be
want to
all
put them back
Texas
into the
all the
South.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. We could
Yeah.
kick them out if we wanted to.
Sure.
Of the
Okay.
Southwest
Yeah.
Conference. Yeah, and
Yeah.
some people would say, John, like, oh, how are these schools going to keep up with Texas and Texas A&M in this new world? I don't know. I mean, you look at what Texas Tech has with that one booster. Who's buying up everybody. His name's escaping me right now, but he's an oil guy. He's the one that bought up that softball player, and Texas Tech was a huge player in the transfer portal this offseason. So all it takes is one rich oil booster, and next thing you know, you're kind of climbing the charts. So I don't think it has to necessarily be permanent that everybody would be looking up at Texas and Texas A&M. Like I said, you get a couple of boosters with their hands covered in the sweet crude at Texas Tech or Baylor or SMU, wherever. All of a sudden, they're a player in the new Southwest Conference that we've just formed, which is really the old Southwest Conference, except we kicked out Arkansas. All right, here's one more for you, John. I might be cutting in line here, but I got one that I think maybe you'll go for. As commissioner, I'm getting rid of spring ball. No spring ball, no spring practice, no spring games. We talked a couple weeks ago about how that kind of stinks for the your middle class family of four. I'm fine with still having a preseason scrimmage. That's okay with me. We find time for that sometime before the season kicks off. But the idea that you need 15 spring practices and this whole song and dance that we go through in March and April, I think that's a really outdated setup. College football likes to fancy itself as basically a mini NFL anyway. Well, NFL teams aren't doing these 15 practices in March and April. And I think with the season going longer and longer, John, you do hear some concerns about player safety. And I say, hey, the players are getting compensated now. So I think fair is fair now, and I'm a little bit more willing to have the season go longer because there is compensation for the athletes, whereas before when they were uncompensated and we were dragging the season longer, I didn't think that was right. But they are compensated now. But I think one trade-off could be give them a little bit more of a break after the season ends in late January. We're not starting these 15 practices, in March and April. Go to a more NFL-style schedule. Have your off-season workouts in the summer. Do maybe a little preseason scrimmage. You can bring Jimmy and Susie out to watch, and I think that's plenty. The athletes are on campus in the summer anyway. They're doing training activities in the summer anyway. I think we've reached the point where we're dragging this season on so long, which I'm fine with. But I think the trade-off for that is let's not do these 15 practices in March and April.
Yeah, you go back. I mean, spring practice has been around forever, but that was before playing college football became a year-round deal. I mean, players used to have summer jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Now their summer job is NIL money, or perhaps revenue sharing will soon come to pass. But no, nothing really good comes of spring practice in my mind. It's just a chance for somebody to get hurt. So many players are held out in scrimmages. I mean, come on. It gives your fifth-string running back a chance to carry the ball 25 times in a scrimmage because you don't want your number one running back risking injury, toting the pigskin in a spring scrimmage. Now, what I would do, you bring up the player safety issue, and I'm all for player safety, but I'm also all about earning your paycheck. So I would allow an extra week of preseason practice. Would you be okay if that start maybe a week earlier so you have more of a preseason? Okay. I
don't want anybody out there in the 110-degree heat, but guess what? Pretty much all these high-powered programs have indoor air-conditioned facilities now that they can move into. So yeah, we can find a happy medium there. And I do have a little bit of a soft spot for Jimmy and Susie, but maybe as commissioner we can say that practices are open to the public. And paranoid coaches, sorry, you got to deal with it. If Jimmy and Susie want to come out to practice, they can bring their popcorn and watch this the left guard slam into a blocking sled. I don't get much enjoyment out of that, but you want to expose your youngster to a big hulking man hitting a blocking sled? The NFL does it. Why is it that the NFL can invite the public out to preseason practices and those coaches aren't too paranoid to deal with it? But in college football, no, can't open things up to the public. No, I'm opening it up to the public. You want to come? Come on out.
Yeah, I can remember I worked in Pittsburgh for a year, and I was on the Steeler beat many years ago, and I remember going through training camp, and Steeler fans would plan a vacation, and they could go out there and sit and watch the Steelers practice. college football fans would go for that. They would. So, and what's the harm? I mean, you look at it doesn't endanger the players for fans to be there, and it also might give them some impetus to play better. Those what we call gamers,
Yeah.
maybe with the hey, oh look, there's Johnny and Susie in the stands. I don't want them to think I'm some slouch. I'm getting ready to knock this guy across from me in the next week. They'll remember this hit.
Hmm.
So there could be advantages that I don't think coaches have thought through. Now, you kind of took an extra turn there. So
I'm sorry. Well,
did you?
fire away,
Yeah,
John. Yeah.
yeah. So as super commissioner, it was your idea, I guess you feel like
The power went to my head.
yeah, you went crazy with power. So here's what I would do. I would only allow these in this new world that we have aligned here. You only get to play one team outside the power leagues. Okay, one team.
Mhm. One cupcake game. That's
Yeah,
all you get.
Notre Dame can only play one MAC team. In fact, I would have Notre Dame having to play Northern Illinois every year. That could be its annual rival, Northern Illinois. I don't quite remember how that game turned out last season, but I have a vague recollection that it didn't go well for the Irish. So yeah, it's just silly. I mean, the NFL doesn't have a play a game against a Canadian Football League team.
No, they do not. It's a good
No.
point.
Yeah. So these are not on the level playing field. So let's level the playing field and require schools to play schools of their ilk. You have a problem with that?
No, I don't. And
Good.
I
Good.
like though, John, that you didn't overreach. You showed you got a little mercy left in you here. You didn't say no cupcake games. You
Yeah.
get to sprinkle one cupcake in there, and I think it's only fair for the little guys, for the Northern Illinois of the world, that they ought to get a crack at somebody here. So you're leaving the room for a monumental upset without completely eliminating cupcake games, but you say, sorry, Mark Stoops, you can only play one MAC opponent in a given season. Stoops might retire on the spot, John. I think if we became commissioners, he wouldn't last the day. He'd be done. He'd be tendering his resignation and focusing on that bourbon business of his.
He would. Yeah, that would be a dagger to the heart for him. And I also, since we're going to do it this way, we don't need any of these FCS teams. I mean, for that one game, I think it would be really intriguing to watch these schools scramble to get the absolute worst opponent they could find for that one game.
From the group of five, you're saying? FCS isn't allowed. Yeah.
No, FCS isn't allowed, but a group of five teams you can find. I think this would result, and I don't have a problem with big scores. I think this would result in somebody scoring 100 points in a game, because the very best teams might want to be no chances on this. We got one shot at this. Let's go get Kent State right now. Let's beat everybody to the punch and hire Kent State to be our punching bag.
Yeah, Kent State could really drive up the price. You know, these group of five schools use that as a paycheck game, and the price of doing business is going up. It seems like anymore costs you about $1.5 million to play one of these games. But if you're Kent State and you're the absolute worst, Kent State went 0-12 this past season. One of your favorite teams, 1-11 the year before that. They're 1-23 the past two seasons. I mean, what do you think they could fetch on this market where you only get to play one? Who gets the honor of playing Kent State? They might be able to drive the price up to about $5 or $6 million for that ball game.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
you can get us, but you can't get us cheap. That would be the Golden Flash's new motto. I love that program. I watched a handful of its games this past year. It's the best bet in college sports. Give the points. Doesn't matter how many. just give them and move on. You don't have to do a lot of analytics. Just give the points, place your wager, and watch the money roll in.
Since I cut in line, John, do you have another one ready there?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And this is one that it's very non-controversial. You won't have a problem with it.
Hmm.
This is, how often do you see things done in with the idea we see things done for money, but how often do we see something done for the good of the game? Here's something I have a problem with in college football. I've always had a problem with this. You have so many talented dual threat quarterbacks, i.e., a running quarterback. Their rushing yardage and NCAA stats. You should not take away yards lost on sacks from a quarterback, because that gives a false picture of what he does statistically.
Mm-hmm.
He's a run. You just can't. I mean, the NFL doesn't do that, and the NFL has it right. So eliminate that. You can count that as you can take sack yardage loss, take it away from team passing totals, but not away from an individual, a running quarterback. You should be able to look at. You see a quarterback's averaging 2.9 yards a carry when he's a tremendous runner. That's because he's lost yardage and sacks. So I would change that rule in the NCAA stats. A very small thing, but something that matters to me, and so I feel like you won't have a problem with.
Well, you know how much I like a dual threat quarterback, John. So I do think they deserve their due in the individual rushing stats category, which is what you're arguing for here. They do all that running around, you get sacked 3 times on top of it, and it's like they haven't done anything, you know?
Yeah, and think how much that would have helped your guy, KJ Jefferson. All those yards he lost in sacks.
Yeah.
Put it back in under his name, those yards. Yeah.
All right, I got one more for you, John, then I'll let you have the last crack at it if you get one more up your sleeve. But I think between the two of us, we can do a pretty good job running this show here, and we get ample days off. I only got to work for one day, and then I hand things over to you the next day. But we can hire a few underlings if we feel like we need them. But I tell you what, I don't need, John, is these conference commissioners with the power going to their head, and they think they really rule the universe. Well, they rule the universe in the current construct of college sports because there is no commissioner. If there was a commissioner, these conference commissioners wouldn't be running around with unchecked power. And that's one reason why we have no college football commissioners. The conference commissioners don't want to give up their power. Well, we've seized the power, John, and I don't need anybody else staging any coups or letting the power go to their head. So we can hire a few underlings to maybe oversee the conferences if we feel like that's necessary. But I don't need any conference commissioners. I don't know if you feel like we need people as designated conference commissioners, but I don't feel like we do. The NFL, you don't see an AFC commissioner and an NFC commissioner. Roger Goodell runs the show, and he's got his underlings to help him carry out orders, and that's that. I don't want anybody thinking that they can organize an uprising and take over here. So I'm getting rid of conference commissioners, and we will oversee this thing with the help of our minions.
What a great idea. I do agree that we need someone to take care of just the perfunctory issues that come along with managing things at a lower level that are really beneath us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be big picture. We're super commissions. We're going to be big picture. We don't have time to handle these details. So I think what you should have with every conference should have what we would call a conference clerk.
Yes. Yes. That would be great.
Yeah, a conference clerk. I think that's a more apt job description of what we want them to do.
Yeah, clerical duties.
Yeah, did you check all the boxes on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, get back to us when you have. Yeah.
Beautiful. We got a little help, but the power's not going to go to their head, and there's going to be no question who's in charge here.
No, their power won't go anywhere. They won't have any power. When we call, they better answer and answer quickly. Okay. Um, so you're giving me another one. I'm not exactly, maybe you can help me with this one. I'm not exactly sure how to frame this, but have you noticed how things have changed in officiating games, but we don't really hear anything about why it's changed or who changed it or what happened? For example, celebrations, unsportsmanlike conduct. And I'm all for celebrations. If you want to dance a few minutes in the end zone, put your best foot forward. I'm all for that. But remember when we get all these penalties for that, and now you see end zone celebrations, but they don't get penalized. We got a taunting rule, but these celebrations happen now. And I never read anything that said, and maybe I missed this, maybe you saw it, that we're going to change the way we enforce touchdown celebrations. I know you can't celebrate before you cross the goal line, which was never a really good idea to begin with, as some players have discovered. But yeah, and another one, I don't know what they're doing with targeting.
Mm.
What
So what do you
game
want
are
to do
we?
with the celebrations, John? Do you want to just make everything legal? You can celebrate as much as you want.
I don't think you should taunt players. I'm
Okay.
okay with the taunting rule. And I don't think, I mean, there has to be a time limit on this. You can't do a 5-minute pre-planned routine. You know,
Uh-huh.
you know, you
What
don't
if they
bring
just did the next play while you were still celebrating? Maybe that should be it. You spot the ball and you can snap it.
no. I would just limit it to maybe 10 seconds. That
Mm.
that gives you time to do your thing and
Mhm.
bring attention to yourself for your accomplishment. And then let's move on with the game. The other one though is targeting. I mean, I just see blatant targeting not called now. I don't know when they're going to call it. It's like they spin a wheel, and if it lands on penalty, you penalize. No penalty. If it sticks on no penalty, you don't. But what was the game we were watching in the playoff? There was a classic case. I think
Was that Penn State Notre Dame?
no, it
Or
was Arizona State,
that's right,
Texas.
Texas. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Texas. This guy said it was as though the defender on this play had a little notepad and looked at it. Here's what targeting is. I'm going to do these three things. Make sure to launch my body, helmet to helmet, so forth. And he executed it perfectly. And lo and behold, it's not targeting.
What if, John, we had like a central office for targeting where at least every one of these instances were reviewed by the same couple of individuals. And so like you didn't let each individual conference kind of decide, have their little replay crew and determine whether it was targeting or not. Like you watch these broadcasts and the different networks have their quote unquote rules officials. At least it would be consistent. If we had like a little targeting bureau, I feel like where in every game, every week, if there's a targeting penalty, it gets reviewed by the targeting bureau, and it's the same couple people, 2 or 3 people that are reviewing these plays. And so I feel like a little more consistency would form there if it's the same review officials every time that just specialize in targeting. They're doing nothing but looking at targeting hits the entire year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, you would have to have an incredibly high threshold for boredom if if you're going to fill that role. But yeah, and you bring up another topic since these networks and conferences negotiate deals, as part of that negotiation as super commissioners, I would like for us to stipulate that there will be no rules analyst in the practice spot. We don't have to hear their comments on a play. You see somebody blatantly attack somebody from behind, and oh, yeah, that's a personal foul. Oh, really? Gosh.
Yeah.
I never would have thought that. Thanks for enlightening me. No, we don't need that at all. We don't need those guys. I don't want to hear from them. I mean, the announcer should know what the rules are, shouldn't they? Is that asking too much?
Hmm. Maybe for our next episode as commissioners, John, we'll have to focus in on how we're going to improve these broadcast crews. But actually, I do think we maybe need to come back to this later in the off season because, hey, let's face it, we got 6 months till the season kicks off. We maybe need to come back at this and do some conference assigning. I think we were really just starting to scratch the surface there. You said you're forcing Notre Dame into a conference, but we haven't unpacked yet where we're putting the Irish. And as we cap these conferences at 12 teams, we got some thinking to do about where we're shuttling off into what direction and which rivalries we're going to restore. So maybe we can put that on the calendar for a boring day in say April or something. Does that sound good?
Well, it doesn't have to be boring. I mean, I have some ideas that we could use. For one, when I brought up having conference clerks as opposed to commissioners. I think we could select clerks for each conference.
Ooh, the clerk competition.
Yeah, I just know if we brought back the old Southwest Conference in our realignment, I would have Eric Dickerson as my conference clerk if he's willing to take the time. I love that guy as a player. So
yeah, and I'm going to find a spot for Ed Ogeron. I don't know where I'm putting him in, but Eddie O, we're finding work for Ed Ogeron. He doesn't have to wear a shirt because I know that's kind of a stipulation for Ed that he must do it shirtless. But I think we need to find a home for Eddie O. That man needs to be in college football. All right, John, we are just getting into our roles here as as college football commissioners, and we might put these hats back on again later in the offseason. For now, thanks for stopping in and listening to us today on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.